My aunt smiled and whispered, "Your grandfather left everything to me." I stayed quiet, because Grandpa had warned me about this day before he died. But the moment the lawyer opened one forgotten wooden box, my aunt realized her biggest secret was about to destroy her life forever. The church was still filled with the smell of fresh flowers from Grandpa's funeral when every member of our family gathered inside his old farmhouse. His favorite chair stood empty near the fireplace, making the silence even heavier. I sat quietly beside the window, trying to accept that the man who had raised me was really gone. Across the room, my Aunt Linda looked completely different from everyone else. While the rest of us struggled to hide our grief, she wore expensive black clothes, perfectly styled hair, and a smile that kept appearing every few seconds. She walked around greeting relatives as if she were hosting a celebration instead of mourning her own father. She eventually stopped beside me and leaned close enough for only me to hear. "Don't get your hopes up, sweetheart. Your grandfather knew exactly who deserved everything." I looked at her but stayed silent. Ever since Grandpa died, she had been telling everyone the same story. She claimed she had sacrificed years of her life to care for him while I was away finishing college. According to her, Grandpa trusted her more than anyone. At first, I believed every word. The family lawyer finally arrived carrying a thick brown envelope. Everyone immediately took their seats. He placed the envelope on the dining table, removed his glasses, and quietly cleared his throat. Before I read Mr. Harrison's will, he left one final instruction. The room instantly became silent. He requested that the wooden box inside his private safe be opened before anyone hears a single word of his will. Linda's confident smile disappeared. "What wooden box?" she asked quickly. "The one only Mr. Harrison and I knew about," the lawyer replied. A strange expression crossed Linda's face. Not sadness. Fear. A few minutes later, Grandpa's old caretaker carried a dusty wooden box into the room. It wasn't large. In fact, it looked so ordinary that nobody understood why Grandpa considered it so important. The lawyer unlocked it. Inside were several sealed envelopes, an old leather diary, a black flash drive, and dozens of small receipts tied together with a faded blue ribbon. The lawyer picked up the first envelope. Across the front, written in Grandpa's handwriting, were only 7 words. "Read this before opening my final will." He unfolded the paper and began reading aloud. "If my family is hearing these words, then I am no longer alive. Before anyone receives my money, they deserve to know the truth. During my final year, I secretly documented everything happening inside this house because someone I loved was slowly stealing far more than my savings." Everyone looked at each other in confusion. The lawyer continued. "I wasn't losing my memory, despite what certain people wanted everyone to believe. I remembered every missing dollar, every missing document, and every lie told inside these walls." The room fell completely silent. Linda suddenly stood up. "Stop reading," she shouted. Dad wasn't thinking clearly during his last months. Nobody answered her. Instead, the lawyer calmly picked up the flash drive and connected it to the television. The first recording appeared. Grandpa sat quietly in his wheelchair near the fireplace. Linda walked inside holding his monthly pension envelope. She looked around to make sure nobody was watching. Then she opened the envelope, removed almost all the cash, placed only a few bills back inside, and left. "You're too old to remember how much money you get anyway." Grandpa looked directly at the hidden camera, but he said nothing. The recording ended. Gasps filled the room. Linda's face turned pale. "It's fake," she screamed. "Someone edited that video." Without arguing, the lawyer opened the second recording. This time, it showed Linda entering Grandpa's bedroom after midnight. She searched every drawer, opened every cupboard, even lifted the mattress. Then she whispered to herself, "Where did you hide the property papers?" A cold silence spread across the farmhouse. Nobody defended her anymore. Even the relatives who had believed every word she said slowly moved their chairs away from her. The lawyer quietly opened Grandpa's diary. Every missing payment, every stolen dollar, every suspicious visit, every conversation had been written down with dates, times, and signatures. Then he reached the final page. If Linda denies everything, call Detective Mason. He already has copies of every recording. Before anyone could react, a loud knock echoed through the farmhouse. The front door opened. 2 police officers walked inside, and the first words they spoke made Linda collapse back into her chair. Linda Harrison, we need to ask you a few questions regarding fraud, theft, and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. The lawyer calmly looked at the 2 police officers before closing Grandpa's diary. The room had become so quiet that nobody dared to speak. Linda tried to force a smile, but her hands were shaking uncontrollably. There has to be some misunderstanding, she said nervously. I looked after my father for years. Why would I steal from him? One of the officers stepped forward and placed a folder on the table. Because this isn't only about the missing money, he replied calmly. We've been investigating this case for almost 3 months. Linda's eyes widened. 3 months. The officer nodded. Your father contacted Detective Mason himself. He believed someone inside this house was slowly stealing from him. He didn't want anyone arrested without proof, so he asked us to investigate quietly. The entire family looked at each other in disbelief. I couldn't believe Grandpa had been carrying such a heavy secret alone. The lawyer opened another envelope from the wooden box. This letter is addressed to my granddaughter, Emily. My heart stopped. He slowly began reading. Emily, if you're hearing these words, I'm sorry I couldn't tell you the truth while I was alive. I wanted to protect you. I knew you would have confronted Linda immediately, and without proof, nobody would have believed you. That's why I stayed silent and collected every piece of evidence myself. Tears filled my eyes. Grandpa had known everything. The lawyer continued. Family isn't the people who share your blood. Family is the people who protect your heart. You never asked me for money. You never asked me for this house. You only asked me to take my medicine and stay healthy. That's why my greatest treasure was never my land or my savings. It was you. The room fell silent once again. Even relatives who had ignored me all these years lowered their heads in shame. The officer then removed another document from his folder. There's one more thing, he said. Mrs. Linda Harrison secretly tried to transfer ownership of this farmhouse 6 weeks ago using forged signatures. Linda immediately stood up. That's a lie. Then explain this. The officer placed the forged documents on the table beside Grandpa's genuine signatures. The difference was obvious. Nobody defended her anymore. Even Linda's own husband quietly stepped away and sat on the other side of the room. The lawyer finally reached for the original will. Now, Mr. Harrison's final wishes. Everyone held their breath. I leave my personal savings to several children's charities because no child should ever feel abandoned. He turned another page. The farmhouse, my farmland, my investments, and everything else I own will belong entirely to my granddaughter, Emily. Linda collapsed back into her chair. No, she whispered. No, that's impossible. The lawyer looked at her one last time. Mr. Harrison added one final sentence. He smiled sadly before reading it aloud. Asterisk, the greatest inheritance I can leave my granddaughter isn't my money, it's the truth. Because money can always be stolen, but the truth always finds its way home. Sometimes, the people who betray us aren't strangers. They're the ones we call family. Money can be stolen. Lies can fool people. But sooner or later, the truth always finds its way home. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Revenge with Mesho for more emotional revenge stories.